Mm, mm, mm,
Hi,
Hey, Dean Halliday. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me. Really
Okay,
appreciate
I've got
it.
a couple of people behind me who are going to be prodding me if I say anything stupid. Okay,
Hmm.
so
Yeah,
I've got Joey, who's our head of communication.
glad to see you.
I'm going to try and unblur this. Uh, video settings. Is that blur my background? There we go.
Oh,
So,
okay. Great
and
to
there's
see
Carl
you.
Capel, who basically. So anyway, thanks for sending the stuff through.
Hmm.
Very interested to hear more about what you're doing. And I'm a kind of a, I tend to take on too many things, which means I don't do anything properly,
Hmm.
which means I haven't really fully grasped your background and what it is you're doing. I've had a quick glance at your website and things, but do you want to kick off by telling us a little bit about your background and how we can help, basically?
Absolutely. So, my name is Elvis Carl, and I'm currently a Schmidt Science Postdoc Fellow at MIT Department of Chemical Engineering. And I got my PhD in 2021 from Cornell University, where I work on how to convert CO2 into useful products. So currently at MIT, my focus is on how to capture CO2 from the air and other sources. So I do have a scientific background. I'm in chemical engineering. I work on carbon capture utilization. And currently, I'm also a working group member for climate education at MIT, where we design how we can do better ground and on-the-ground level climate education within the institute, but also we want to look at outside impact. And then and a colleague of mine, which is Zach, who is not joining today, but he's from Stanford Dual School, and we two spoke and we figured out there's a new model by Stanford and there's a new model by Columbia Climate School, and we wanted to understand how we can use the models from these two schools to help other institutions domestically and also internationally to ensure equitable climate education for all of the people. And we too wrote a commentary article outline, sent that to the editorial office for Nature Climate Change, and the editor likes the idea. And so right now we think we wanted to listen to what you we talk to us about Columbia's model, and we already spoken to Stanford, and we wanted to see synthesize the learnings and then combine the learnings into the piece and the piece is how to ensure equitable climate education. So really glad to have the opportunity to finally to meet you. But and we also prepared a couple of questions, but definitely no. Let me know if there's anything about some clarification on.
Okay, no, that sounds great. Very happy to talk. And just to say, I think this is wonderful. And I think you can never have too many climate schools right now. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely a good thing to be doing. And Stanford and Columbia, the strength of the two institutions is fantastic, but quite different
Mm-hmm.
between Stanford and Columbia in terms of climate. We've got a different kind of footprint, a different funding model. So we are very different, as well as both being schools developing climate and sustainability. So, and we've had communication with Stanford. Even before we started our schools,
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with people there about what they were doing, and we were talking a bit about what we were doing. So the idea is that what we believe is that actually this problem is so vast and so important and so all-encompassing. We actually need schools to work together in a way that they haven't done previously. Typically, universities are intensely competitive,
Mm-hmm.
but this is the kind of problem that does require cooperation and joint working. So, very keen to support them in what they're doing and look for ways we can work together in synergies. We've talked about maybe collaborating on some things.
Mm-hmm. I see. I see. So I do prepare 5 questions. Do you prefer I go over the question one by one so that it's more organized? Whatever you prefer, I'm flexible.
I probably do them one by one. I don't really want to answer 5 questions at
Okay,
once.
definitely, absolutely. So our title will be ensuring equitable access to climate change education, and the abstract is what learnings, frameworks, models are established by the new climate schools initiatives that can effectively translate it to other education settings across the world. And within that question, how can equitable access to such education be best ensured? So this is not a question. This is just our piece. Want to answer that, and we want to examine the models by Stanford and Columbia and see how we can find an answer to them. So the first question will be, how do you feel that restructuring or organizing an entirely new school under the banner of climate sustainability creates meaningful change? That is, how it is different, and how does the new designation work to address climate change sustainability versus civil engineering, environmental engineering, or earth sciences?
Yeah, so very happy to answer that. So when we were considering doing a climate school, we talked with every existing school at Columbia about the idea, see what they thought. So I went around, talked to each dean, talked to their teams, and we put together a task force from across the university to consider what we might do and whether this might be a good idea or not. And I think there was because some schools already do a lot in this of environmental work. I think there was naturally questions as to what the climate school would add that would be different from what they're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have an environmental science school, though. We've got a Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. We've got Earth and Environmental Engineering. We've got environmental health sciences. So these are the kinds of constructs that we've already got. And what we were looking for is to build a school that is more transdisciplinary than that. So for 2 reasons, really. The first is that when we went around each school, we realized that every school was interested in climate change. And many of them were doing a lot. Some of them were just really keen to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The School of Dentistry is interested in climate change.
Wow.
Okay, so and they want us to help, develop a curriculum for them. So there's no question. This is the big topic people need to be focusing on,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody wants to get involved. The university's totally behind us across the whole piece. But that means that if you're going to build a school that's going to do something new, then the obvious thing is to bring people together and support what's going on across the school while also providing a focused activity. So it's a kind of a hub and spokes model that we've got here at Columbia. We haven't moved any departments in. So Stanford's been very different in that respect. We've kept all our departments and schools intact. We've built this new school as a way of networking what's going on across the existing schools while building a hub of activity. And that's largely based on what we've been able to achieve with the Earth Institute, which is the sort of the predecessor of the school which has been going for 25 years, which basically networks a lot of activity across Columbia. Now, there's a second reason for doing this, and that is that the climate problem is inherently and multidisciplinary. There's no question that you can do fantastic climate science, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to do anything that will really impact the climate problem in a big way with scale, like with gigatons or whatever. So if we're going to do something that actually really addresses the climate change problem in a useful way, just graduating great students and making wonderful alumni or getting lots of nature papers, that isn't necessarily going to have a big impact on the climate problem. What we realized we had to do was to bring together things like technical solutions with policy, with ethics, with law, and with studies of environmental impact around those solutions as well. So that's the space that the climate school occupies. It brings people together with from those different sectors and actually builds a curriculum that's around that, very transdisciplinary, and conducts research in that area. And we have great academics wanting to come to Columbia from wonderful institutions around the United States and elsewhere. And they want to come because of what the climate school is doing in this transdisciplinary way. It's not just engineering, it's doing these other things. And that's because that's the nature of the climate problem. If we don't bring people together to think about solutions that will really work in society, then we haven't really made much difference to the climate problem. So that's the difference I think we have to mention.
I see. I'm personally also super interested in Columbia's climate school as my future employer. But
come and join us! Come and join us! Great, great. Don't say anything too negative about it.
I really think the new model is because currently I'm in Schmidt Science Fellowship program funded by Eric Schmidt, and we also look at interdisciplinary solutions to big problems, and climate change is definitely one of the top problems we are interested in. Okay. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks so much for sharing insights. So moving to the next question. What can other schools and organizations learn from Columbia's model? How can this model be translated to best aid other institutions in likewise addressing and educating on climate change related issues?
So I think I think there are like two answers to everything here. So the first thing to say is that I think no university is the same. So all universities have got certain characteristics. They've got very clever people. They're supposed to be creative, doing really hard stuff. But at the same time, they typically have different strengths and weaknesses. And so just copying what Columbia is doing may not be the best thing to do, because we've got a phenomenally strong climate science capability here through the Mont the Earth Observatory, but also we've got 20 other centers based here at Columbia working on climate and sustainability related issues. So we're huge in that subject area, particularly on the scientific side. We're also based in New York City, which gives us a great opportunity for connecting with the world of finance and business. It's one of the most diverse cities in the world. It's one of the most exciting cities in the world to be having conversations. And it's also one of it's at the heart of the United Nations as well as here. So it's kind of like, this is where people come and interact. And then it's also a city that's been affected by climate change. With Hurricane Sandy, we've got a mayor's office that is totally committed to decarbonizing and actually building resilience for the future. So, I mean, I can't think of anywhere better to build a climate school than Columbia University in the city of New York. But at the same time, other places have got very different strengths. They've got different, they've got other places may be far better than we are in certain subjects. We're not strong in everything. And so I think building on the strengths we've got, for example, the land grant universities typically have agriculture programs and have forestry programs and things like that. And that we don't have that. So we are very interested in the issue of climate and food, but our strength primarily comes from the fact that we're very good at climate modeling. So I think actually different universities can contribute different things and think about ways in which they could not copy what we're doing, but actually think about new ways of doing things that might work. The second answer is that structurally different universities can be very, very different. So I said we don't have a school of the environment, but some universities do have a school of the environment, and they've already moved into thinking about how to build something like a climate school, but not quite the same. Other universities like Penn State has got tons of different things around environment scattered across the university. So I think trying to just duplicate what we're doing again, organizationally, might not be the right thing to do. You might find, regardless of your academic strength or where you're located, you might find just organizationally, you might want to think about doing something different or something, maybe build on what we're doing, something that is actually particularly focused on a particular part of the problem. But that highlights the fact that no university's got a monopoly on every aspect of this problem. And actually what you need to do is to learn to build your own academic programs, but partner with others in the process. And sorry, I know I'm talking too long about this, but there's one very important aspect of this that I think needs to be considered, which I know you're going to come on to in some of your other questions. And that is that a lot of the solutions that we think as academics make a lot of sense. If you get out there and work in the real world with communities around the world or other countries, you'll realize that actually they're already way ahead of you. And they're the ones who are going to be teaching you about climate solutions. And so the climate school at Columbia has been built very much with that in mind, that we engage with the world, not to provide solutions, but also for them to learn from other parts of the world and figure out how we can work well with those other areas. So you go to a place like Bangladesh, it's like that's an amazing country because they've realized they're incredibly vulnerable to climate change, and they are already doing a whole lot of things to build resilience going forward. And I'm sure we're going to find the same with some of the Pacific Island states, etc. You're going to find the same kind of thing. Local organizations, local universities are actually the ones who are going to be teaching us about how to build resilience. So that partnership thing is actually really, really sensible because you're going to learn a lot, even if you think you're in the greatest university in the world, like MIT, you're going to learn a lot from other partner organizations.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And so our next question is there a plan to distribute the newly developed climate school courses to online open access platforms? If not, how can courses still be used to reach audiences and create impact beyond Columbia?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. At the moment, we're just getting started. So we have a number of degree programs that we've built as an Earth Institute that are delivered to other schools. We've taken one of those, now that we are a school, we've taken one of those back and actually built our first degree programs that way so that we could get going quickly. Otherwise, you've got to wait for getting accreditation you've got to get approval through the state and everything else takes ages. So we've got a master's in climate and society, which is a mixture of social science, science, technology, etc., which is a 12-month program, which has the summer months are spent in some kind of practice-related work. So you get experience maybe as an intern or whatever in various places. So that's a great program. We're looking to build other programs. But of course, New York is one of the most expensive places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Columbia University is one of the most expensive universities in the world because we're in New York. And most people around the world are going to struggle to find the tuition that's needed, the cost of trying to live in New York or pay the tuition. So we are passionate about trying to raise funding for scholarships so that anybody from whatever their background can come to Columbia, and we can have some kind of a way of allowing people in regardless of their financial circumstances. So that has to be the first priority, I think, in building a school, is to make it accessible for people all over the world. The second thing, though, is that, at the moment we've got a master's program that has something like 85 students in it, something like that. We're trying to grow it, of course. But, given the immensity of the climate crisis, we need to figure out how we can train 100,000 students a year, not 100 students, So figuring out how to do that, so I'm in conversation with others around the world who are very interested in the same problem. There needs to be, people need to build capacity in their various countries to understand not just the climate crisis, but also what to do about it and how to get projects going in their own country that will actually help them decarbonize, etc., or build resilience. A lot of countries have made commitments to doing things where they actually don't know what to do. Actually, that's true of pretty much anybody. So I think the net result is that we've got to think about new ways of delivering education that go out globally and actually provide faster access to the evidence. So we're working on that. I wouldn't like to say that we've got it sorted, but we are in discussion with others around the world about how to do that. And it includes people who might just need the education because they're working in a company or working in a government or a community where they don't have access to that. Even some universities, they don't have much access as they might like in climate education. But we're also looking at the idea of training people up through the PhD postdoc level as well, providing the resources for them to come to Columbia and actually gain access that way.
I see. Thank you. So our next question is, what is the new school's plan to promote environmental and climate justice? You mentioned a bit about that, but how can we use this new model established by creation of the climate schools to ensure propagate equitable access to climate education in both marginalized communities within the US and within developing or emerging economies around the world?
Yeah, great question. Utterly important. And from the very beginning, climate justice has been recognized as a massively important part of what we do. And it has to, we think about it with everything that we're doing, all our degree programs, but actually building research programs, how to build community. And there are a number of, there are the obvious issues that actually the most socially disadvantaged people in society are the least responsible for the climate crisis. And so there's an immediate climate justice issue around that needs thinking about on the mega scale around who pays for, so there are climate finance issues around that. But I think there's also the whole issue of how do you get the voices of people from different parts of society to be present at when we're doing things. So this has been something we've been working on quite hard. We have, and there's a really important problem here which needs to be addressed. And that is if you look at the issue of diversity in amongst academics, the geosciences is one of the least diverse subject areas in academia, certainly in the United States and the UK, where I come from. And there could be a variety of reasons for that, but in terms of they've managed to make a difference over the last couple of decades through the gender diversity issues, but in terms of ethnicity and race, there's actually been I think there's been less progress in the geosciences than any other subject, pretty much, even in the other sciences. So we're starting from using geosciences as a base for a lot of what we're doing in climate, when actually we don't have the pipeline of people from diverse backgrounds to really provide a diverse faculty in the normal sense. So we are, of course, recruiting heavily. And our first faculty hire was a wonderful person, Christina Douglas, who is, she works on climate justice issues, very much so from the point of view of anthropology and archaeology in Africa. And she herself is a person of color. And we've made it clear that we want to have that diversity built into it's a goal to build diversity into the school as we go. And that's been something we're pursuing in a variety of ways. So we're doing that. At the same time, we're also working on the pipeline issues. How do you actually get more kids from New York City who might not immediately think of, it may be different if you live in Wyoming, but if you live in New York City, probably geology isn't the first thing you think of as a subject. That you grew up around lots of social justice issues, and you might not think of going into geology. It's the same in Detroit or Chicago or anywhere like that. So how do we change that? Well, we're actually getting school kids from the local area to come through, teaching them about science and how we do science at the Le Mans of the Earth Observatory in particular, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, geosciences unit in the world in any major university, and giving them experience of being a scientist. We've done it in the past also in climate modeling. We've actually got school kids to come in and actually learn about climate science. Sometimes they didn't go on to be climate scientists, but they did discover the excitement of doing science that way. So there are those kind of pipeline approaches we're taking. And then I think the other thing to say is that we're living in a community here in Manhattan that is incredibly diverse. The new campus where the climate school building is going to be is actually in West Harlem, and we have an opportunity there to make the community part of what we're doing. So there's a strong focus on bringing in local community leaders to be part of what we're doing in the climate school. We've been doing that already. The new building will have a ground floor that's completely open to the public. So we will actually we'll have their voices at the table while we're talking about climate. There's one other component I should just mention quickly, and that is that climate justice or environmental justice also has a component which is about the law and human rights and those kinds of things. And this is an area where Columbia is very strong, and because we have the Sabin Center for Climate Law, and we're looking to grow that and expand that, mainly from the point of view of thinking about how do we actually help people to understand their rights in terms of the climate problem. And I guess lastly, I would say that a lot of our work that we've been doing, building networks, we've set up a lot of networks at Columbia University through the climate school, and also some of the education programs. They are extremely focused on climate justice issues and how that relates to cities and et cetera. We've got wonderful colleagues here who help with this. I can't tell you how much focus there is. And of course, if you talk to the students about it, they are totally focused on this. They see this as a massively important problem.
I see. Thanks so much. And the final question we have is, so as we mentioned, the current tentative title for our piece is Ensuring Equitable Access to Climate Change Education. So what are your thoughts about this? How do we go about ensuring equitable access? What recommendations do you have, or best practices or lessons learned?
So I think the first thing to say is that if you're talking about equitable access to education, I mean, to some extent, it replicates what I said earlier. That you need to provide financial opportunity, financial support for people to get an education. And some people don't have that. So I think that has to be our priority, just providing the support that they need. But then also seeing if there are ways in which we can get education out into communities around the world in ways that actually does have, in ways that they can actually easily afford. So what we've talked about is maybe doing some building education programs that could go out online as online classes, which would be available for anybody. They would actually end up with some certification. The cost would be relatively minor, et cetera, going forward. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. So I think that's the answer to your question, but I'm not sure it's similar to one of the other questions you asked. So I don't know whether I've really misjudged it, or I'm giving you the wrong answer.
I think I already take notes, and for all of the questions, I'll definitely send that information from the answers you give to prior questions for sure. But I also wanted to ask, is there anything you think we have left out, some critical discussion that you really want to end about Columbia's model? Because we spoke to, so currently, and MIT, I'm part of the education working group, and we figure out it's probably easier to have more climate education at underground level, but for grant level, especially for PhD levels, if we want to blend some climate education into the current program, it's going to be a little bit challenging. And so we are thinking about having some minor, probably some certificate program that the students can take part in. But I would just feel like I just wanted to ask, is there anything else you think you want to add to the discussion?
Well, I think the only thing I would add is that we need to work fast.
Yeah.
So I think as universities, ponder what they might do, we're running out of time. And the world has to act really, really fast on this. Universities have to think about what more they can be doing. This is the biggest problem we've faced and will be facing. And so we do need to, and it's an all-encompassing problem, and we need universities to think creatively about what more they can do to help that might make a difference. So what we've done at the Climate School is to think about the divisions or departments that will populate the Climate School. And those are around subjects that we think are going to be really important, like, adaptation or climate modeling or social systems and justice, those kinds of, decarbonization, those kinds of things. But we're also thinking about, they might be the long term. In the future, climate schools might be quite normal to have lots of climate schools, and they'll all have a department of decarbonization. Just like you've got, a medical school, you've got departments like pathology and things like that, and genetics. But you've also got things that are about oncology and heart disease, etc. So you've got a mixture of disciplines and problems. We're designing the climate school in the same way with these parts of the climate school that are about studying different parts of the subject. But that's the long-term structure of the school. It may well be that all schools are like that eventually. If we're going to do something really fast, though, we've got to think about that stuff, but actually not forget that right now we've got a crisis around extreme events and coastal resilience. We've got a crisis around forest ecosystem and wildfires. We've got a crisis about food security and climate. We've got crises about climate mobility and the fact that people are going to have to migrate in the future. We've got the crises around how do we decarbonize negative emissions, which is you're working on. And we've also got energy storage, these kinds of issues. So how do we actually, if we really want to affect the climate crisis, just thinking about the anatomy of the school isn't good enough. We've got to think about what we're really going to do in the next 5, 10, 20 years to help make a difference. And so we are focusing as a school on those problems that we think we need to make a difference. We need to really make a big effort to really move those subjects forward if we're going to have real impact on society and be able to do something to help this crisis going forward. The second thing I would say is that there has to be a strong way of engaging the school with society. So if you're going to really do something that's going to make a difference, then we've got to have a school that is connected to the local city, in our case, New York, but also figure out how to connect with people around the world in their communities to make a difference, working with businesses, working with different countries, etc., helping them and engaging and providing something that they really need. So a climate school is actually quite different from a science school. A climate school is more like a medical school. It's also focused on solutions and problems as well as the disciplines, but it also is there rather like a medical school to have, if you like, a side to it, which is practice related, where patients come in, they get fixed up and they go away again. Climate school's got to be like that, where you actually are really interacting with the world and doing something that is good for society.
I see. I really like the analogy between climate school and the medical school. That's pretty similar in nature.
The medical school is a great example of academic excellence being put to work in the community and making a difference.
I see. All right. I think thank you so much for agreeing to speak to me. And so my final question would be, so me and my colleague will be putting together a piece. And since we have spoken to you, I was wondering before we send that back to the editor office, is there anyone I can reach out to in Colombia to look over the piece? Just to make sure I just want to make sure I synthesize the learnings, and this will be the learnings you want others to see as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, feel free.
Okay.
Joey here.
For the questions we need, information, whether it's that Columbia or anything else, we can help you.
Sounds great. So I'll be reaching out and really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I know you're super busy, and thanks so much.
No, not at all. Great to talk to you. And seriously, if you're interested in coming to Colombia, come through sometime and we can talk. And I'm not sure that we can offer you anything, but we'd love to talk to you anyway.
Definitely, definitely interesting. And we, by the way, at MIT, there's upcoming climate education symposium. I'm part of the organizers, so we are definitely planning to invite you either give a virtual or on-site talk, but we'll reach out later.
That'd be great.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate everything. I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.